Now ready to talk about the aggregate supply. We've already defined and explained aggregate demand. And so to complete the aggregate supply, aggregate demand model, let's now look at aggregate supply. The aggregate supply curve is a curve that shows the relationship between the level of prices and the quantity of output supplied. I'll show you that on the next slide. But before we move on, we also need to discuss the fact that the aggregate supply curve is different in the short run than it is in the long run. We assume in the short run prices are sticky and wages are sticky. In the short run, those don't change much, or they're sticky. So in the short run, the aggregate supply curve is different than in the long run, because in the long run, we assume prices are more flexible. So the long run aggregate supply curve is a vertical aggregate supply curve that represents the idea that in the long run, output is determined solely by factors of production. So in the long run, as you can see here, the aggregate supply curve is vertical. Okay? That means that any change in aggregate demand is going to be it's going to cause a price change and not a quantity output. Now, this doesn't say the aggregate supply curve can't shift in the long run. If our economy becomes more and more productive, we'll have shifts in this direction. Okay? Assuming that that does not happen, and assuming that we're always operating at y of p, then what's going to happen is, I'll show you the next slide. If that's the case, if we're always at we're always using this long-run aggregate supply curve right here, what would happen is if you had a shift in aggregate demand, as I said earlier, if you had an increase in aggregate demand, then all that's going to do is cause prices to go up. Because before we were at this price level P0, now we'll be at this price level P1. Okay? And that might be caused by, let's say, a tax cut or increase in government spending or some other type of stimulus that would cause the aggregate demand to shift up. So anyway, this explains why if in the long run, using or trying to shift the aggregate demand curve is more likely to cause a price increase than any change in output.